at a book a month. Oops. Okay, now we're live streaming. So I'm Áureo, one of the teachers here at a book a month. Ana is the other teacher. We will introduce ourselves in a second. Today we're offering this open class, this lecture on tips to read, how to use literature to improve your foreign language. Okay, so tips and advice on how to use literary texts. We're not thinking on any text whatsoever. We're thinking about literary writing. So I think the things we'll discuss tonight, you'll be able to use it. I don't know if you study French or German or Japanese, perhaps you'll be able to apply those to any language. Actually, we are using those techniques while teaching here at a book a month, but they can be applied very broadly. Okay, and usually our students are speaking a lot during the class, so we really love a conversational approach. So we're always talking a lot, and it goes back and forward. Today I'll be speaking a little bit more. Me and Ana will be in the spotlight here, but then we have a Q&A session at the end, so you guys can offer advice, share your own experience, ask questions, whatever you wish. Okay, I think we will talk for 1 hour perhaps. Okay, and our title tonight is how to improve your English through literature. So just to present ourselves, Ana, you start, you go first.
Right, everyone, so hello. I think most of you I know because we have spoken on WhatsApp, right? So whenever you message a book a month, you're talking to me possibly. So nice to meet you all. I am Ana Carolina Torquato. I am one of the founders and teachers of a book a month. Besides being a teacher here, I'm also an academic, right? I think it's not a novelty to you. But at the moment, I'm doing my postdoc. I'm based in São Paulo, but the postdoc is by the University of Cologne. And I also have a PhD in comparative literature by the University of the Federal University of Paraná. And I have also done my master's in literature and comparative literature, more specifically through the universities of Sheffield in England, Santiago de Compostela in Spain, and Nova de Lisboa in Lisbon, right? This is a multi-institutional master's degree, and have studied and have a degree from all of those, right? This is the same case for Áureo as well. So nice to meet you all. If you, some of you have already met in other sessions, and also some of you are students. So welcome to this class. And now Áureo is going to introduce himself as well.
Yeah, so I'm Áureo Lustosa Guérios. Nice to meet everybody. I'm also a PhD in comparative literature. I took my degree in the University of Padua in Italy, and I also have taken my master's in Italy as well, in the University of Bologna mostly, but also with 2 exchange periods, in one of 6 months in France, in the University of Strasbourg, and another one in Greece, in the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. Somebody has the mic open, guys. Yep. Okay. I also host a podcast. I don't know if you guys heard about it, but it's called Literatura Viral, in which I discuss the history of medicine, actually, and its relationship to literature and art in general. So there are many episodes in which I discuss themes which are related somehow, or authors or literary works which are related to what we teach in a book a month, and to what we will discuss today here. So there are episodes on Poe, on Susan Sontag, Mary Shelley, H.G. Wells, etc. So if you wish to have a look, you can find it in Spotify or Apple or whatever podcast finder. Okay, and then a book a month is the school through which we operate. Me and Ana, we are teaching how a way to practice language. Okay, so a book a month is a method to practice and to improve your language. We're not teaching language directly here. We're using the knowledge that you already mastered, the skills you already have, and we're putting it into practice and to learn about literature. So we're teaching literature, and as a secondary objective, we're practicing English and improving the way we speak and the way we use our languages. Okay, and why we're doing that? Why using literature rather than, I don't know, like TV series or magazines or whatever? And I think we can use two types of arguments to support the idea of using literature. First, there's a series of linguistic arguments. Literature is highly charged linguistically. It really expands language awareness. So in the literary usage of language it's very synthetic. It's very it can be very complex grammarly wise. It can be very complex vocabulary wise. So it really gives you a broad view and a vast array of possibilities. Simply put, if you want to speak better Portuguese, even if you're a native speaker, one of the best things you can do, and that's what we do in high school, is to read, right? And if that applies to Portuguese, to your mother language, that also applies to any foreign languages you're learning. It can be English, but it can be also anything else, any other language you're studying, okay? Literature, moreover, is authentic material. So it is not manipulated to fit your level, okay? It can put you into a lot of pressure, but that's mostly a good thing, I would argue, okay? Sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming, but on average, it is a good thing. Literature has the power of challenging us very much. It taking us out of our comfort zone when it comes to language and linguistics, okay? And literature also teaches in context. So if you're meeting new vocabulary or finding for the first time different syntactical constructions, grammar structures you've never seen, very likely, if they are not contextualized, if you're finding new vocabulary in a list, for example, list of words, it's unlikely you'll be able to memorize them. Our memory works in context, right? So that's why things you learn in your practical life, things you learn when you're interested in the subject, words that you learn while speaking with friends or interacting abroad, for example, you absorb them and you don't really forget them, okay? So when you're learning in context, learning becomes much more solid when it comes to foreign languages. But there are also many social advantages, right? So literature is very motivating on the psychological level, let's say, on a personal level. It encourages a lot of interaction. So if you want to practice and a conversation, if you want to speak, literature can be an interesting way of igniting the fire, let's say. Rather than having to talk about yourself or about your life, you can discuss this topic, and perhaps you have your own perspectives, your own agenda, your ideas you would like to share, and therefore you have motivation to interact and to engage in the discussion. And literature also educates the whole person, right? So we're not only talking about literary theory or about the author or about the historical background of the text. We do all of that in a book a month, but those are possibilities. But beyond that, literature offers things that are much more profound and humane, in the sense that it can give us a glimpse to think about profound things like, I don't know, what is happiness, what is compassion, what is the life we should live, and good examples, bad examples. So there's much humanism to be found within literature. So one of the great things to use it to practice foreign languages is that you get so many advantages, collateral advantages, actually, secondary effects, which are truly, truly great. And above all, literature is simply awesome. We are suspect because we've dedicated so many years of our academic careers to pursue literature. We're both PhDs in literature, so of course we think it is great, right? We would not have pursued such a career if we did not think that, right? So this is one of the important things that I would like you guys to have in mind throughout this class, is that we do the talk, but we also walk the walk. So everything that we'll offer from now on, it's something that we probably have applied directly in our own studies, or in just one or two cases. There's one of the techniques that I've never used. I know someone who used it. It's not really my style, but usually we have personal experience with all of the things we'll talk about today. So we do the talk and we walk the walk because we've been there. Okay, so and one of the things is that we're both polyglots. So Ana speaks 5 languages, I speak 6. Ana, would you like to share your language itinerary?
Yeah. So I have been studying languages. Well, I'm very interested in languages, as you can tell, right? It's something that we do not only because we are interested in professionally, also because we are genuinely interested in learning languages more specifically. But I can tell you that as most of you, as I believe you share the same experience, I have studied English and Spanish in high school. Yeah, I think this is something that you have taken as part of your life as well. But when I joined university, when you are a literature student, usually you are offered the possibility of studying several languages if you want to, right? So if you want to take other courses with classmates that take other majors, you can do that. So this is what I did. While I was studying in university, in my undergraduate course, I did some French courses in the university, but also outside. So I studied French for about 3 years and a half. I also took some German classes in university as an undergraduate student, and then I continued to studying German throughout my life, my adult life, because there's never enough time to study German, apparently. And I also did courses outside university in order to improve my language skills. I studied abroad, right? So in order to manage Spanish, I also lived in Spain during my master's degree. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the Spanish case, which for me is something particular. And in order to prepare for my what we call in Portuguese like a sandwich doctorate, a sandwich PhD that I did in Germany. I did some courses before going to Germany, but also I was studying a lot on my own. That means I was reading a lot in German. I was listening to audiobooks in German. I was listening to podcasts and watching films in German, doing whatever I could in order to be more immersed in the language. Yes. So in English for me, like, was something that it was also always present, because I've majored both in Portuguese and in English at the university, right? So besides all the other the languages that I studied on my own or taking like free courses, I also did a major in English as part of my degree. Yes.
My experience with languages is pretty similar. I had already graduated in English and Spanish by the time I finished high school. I decided to study for my bachelor's Italian literature, actually. So I've learned, I could not speak Italian yet. So I learned in university Italian and French. So by the time I graduated, I was fluent in those four languages, English, Spanish, French, and Italian. I had studied Latin throughout the university for 2 years. I studied Latin, but nobody speaks Latin, right? I can read some inscriptions when I'm traveling and things like that, but that's pretty much it. We don't use it Latin that much. And during my master's, I also took a year and a half of modern Greek, because I've lived in Greece for 6 months, but yeah, I don't even say I can speak Greek, because I have only enough to order something at the restaurant or to I don't know, make a hotel reservation. So it's very, very limited, but it's a lovely language, and it was a great experience to learn it for a year and a half, more or less. I got barely into the basic level. And then I've been, since a few years actually, studying German on my own. As we all know, life is too short to learn German, right? But we've been trying. So Anna is much more advanced than I am. I'm a pretty low intermediate, but I can read in German, though. I speak very, very badly. And I'm not very interested in speaking, actually. I would prefer to read in German. And so one of the things that I do, not a lot, but from time to time, I'm reading in German as a way to practice. So pretty much everything we'll be talking about from now on. While studying abroad, as I mentioned before, I took my master's in Europe and my PhD as well, both in Italy. We had the experience of not only studying but also writing in foreign languages. So I wrote my master thesis in Italian and my PhD thesis in English. So it was quite a mess to get to the end of the mission, precisely because we have to rework the way we think, actually, throughout the writing process, to reanalyze the way we express ourselves, and it's very, very much connected to reading in general. Ana mentioned her experience with Spanish. I don't know if you could mention about the way you practice and learn it a little bit more, Ana.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention also something about academic writing, people, because in class, usually this is something that people ask me a lot. Unlike Áureo, I didn't write my thesis initially. Well, I started writing it in English, but then I had to translate it into Portuguese and finish it in Portuguese, my master's thesis, right? And my PhD thesis is in Portuguese. But one of the things that we have to acknowledge in the present time is that if you're an academic and you have to present your work internationally, you're probably going to have to write in English, right? And this is one of the things that we both do a lot. And I'm sure that if you are academics as well, you're probably going to face this challenge within your life. So this is something that we can achieve as well. Like academic literacy, we can achieve and expand much more with reading. But the thing with Spanish is that, I don't know about you, but usually I get the feeling that this is an experience that is very widely shared among Brazilians. We're often a bit unsure when we speak Spanish, mostly because we are afraid of making confusion and confused vocabulary and structure and such, right? And this was always my thing. So I always felt that I needed to improve my Spanish in either way, but I never had like a time to really stop and take Spanish classes, right? So what I did when I went to live in Spain, in Santiago de Compostela, I had to do like an intensive on my own, right? So I used to live with two Spanish girls, and we used to talk a lot. So we did have like this immersive coexistence, right? Co-living. But also I did a lot of practice on my own, like learning how to conjugate verbs on my own, listening to books, reading a lot in Spanish, and mostly trying to explain myself, trying to expose my own ideas in Spanish with the tools that I had, right? Besides going to university, taking the classes, right? I don't know if you know this, but the University of Santiago de Compostela is located in Galicia. So they have like two official languages, Gallego and Spanish, right? Which is, Gallego is very close to Portuguese. So this was something that for me was an opportunity to expand my own knowledge, right? And I have to say that I never took like a formal class in Spanish, but nowadays, after doing this effort that I did, like of producing knowledge on my own, try to study on my own, read a lot and write a lot in Spanish, today I'm able to produce Spanish in an academic level. So when I mean academic level is like writing academic articles in Spanish, presenting and teaching in Spanish as well, right? So this is something that you can achieve, but you have to be consistent, right? When you're doing this kind of study, and it helps a lot. And I think that Áureo has had a similar experience in his life background as well.
When studying German, one thing that I do, and I know Ana does it as well, is precisely to read a lot. As I mentioned, I want German more to read than to go travel or something like that. I want to read German literature actually one day, but I'm not at that level yet. So one of the things that I do is read easier texts, which interest me very much. So I've discovered that Dalai Lama, when he writes, his sentences are very short and they're very easy to understand. And so I've been reading a few books by Dalai Lama. I'm a bit interested in Buddhismus. I'm Buddhism. Buddhismus is German, right? And so I'm reading Dalai Lama's books in German. Okay, I can understand perhaps 60% of what is said, 70%. It's not enough. I cannot fully grasp the arguments and the entire logic of the text, but it does not. I do not care so much about that. I'm doing that in order to learn about Buddhism definitely, but mostly to practice my German, to get it into shape, to polish it for higher challenges. So I've been doing this with German. Ana has been doing that as well. And then A Book a Month was born also as a way to put these ideas into practice. And so how to read in a foreign languages? There are a few things that we have to keep in mind if we want to read in a language that is not our own, okay? I think one of certainly the first one is to manage our expectations, okay? You cannot expect to just open the book and read it through as you would do it with Portuguese, okay? You don't have the same level. We have to admit that. We're not native speakers of foreign languages, right? Unless you're bilingual and you were lucky enough to be born in a household where your mama would be speaking German and your father Chinese, and then you would learn everything. Unless that's your scenario, you're speaking probably Portuguese as a mother language, and then everything else is a foreign language. And so by definition, it will be worse in this sense, even if you're a very fluent, even if you're a great speaker. So one of the things, oops, my slides just disappeared. One of the things that we have to come to grips with is precisely managing expectations and managing frustration. So you will understand less. That's a fact. You will have to read it slower. Okay, don't expect, if you're reading, I don't know, 30 pages an hour in Portuguese, don't expect to do the same in a foreign language. If you do expect that, you'll get frustrated with your progress. Okay, so accept that the quality of it will be a little bit less, and then that's okay. You don't have to despair regarding that. If it's too hard, you should understand why. Okay, so perhaps when you try reading something in English, for example, if you're not really getting it through, if the message is not coming, if you realize you're not understanding the text and thinking about something else, there's something going on, and you are the person who will be able to pinpoint what's going on. So perhaps the vocabulary is too hard. Perhaps the level it's above your own level. Okay, the vocabulary could be old. For example, if you want to start reading literature in English, Shakespeare is not a good place to start. Although Shakespeare is awesome and we love it, it's not a good place to start. It's way too difficult, because it's very, very refined, but also because it's very old, right? So usually the older it gets, the hardest it is. So I would advise you to, in general terms, to look for things which are contemporary, for example, which will use the English of nowadays, or the German or the Mandarin of everyday life today, now, at the present. Perhaps the vocabulary is informal, using too many slangs or using local idioms, right? So using local expressions, speaking, I don't know, like Texan English, for example. Or so, of course, if you're using sub-dialects of English, of course, it will be more difficult. If you're listening to rap, for example, and rap can have many codes and many slangs, and so obviously it will be tougher. Perhaps the structure is too complex. Some writers are very refined in the way they use grammar, right? So that could be a problem. Perhaps the theme is too complicated. If you're trying to read an engineering manual, or if you're reading an article in astrophysics, perhaps the problem is not your English per se, but the theme that you're reading about. And sometimes when we're reading literature, especially, we have to keep an eye to distinguish between the problems which are linguistic, and the problems which are literary. Okay, literary texts, they can be very difficult on occasion. And sometimes we can feel that we're not really following what's happening. But perhaps even if you were reading it in Portuguese, still you would meet the same challenges, you would have the same difficulties. Okay, so sometimes when we're reading in a foreign language, we get the idea that we're not following, but not necessarily that it happens because of language itself, but the problem could be the literary work, the literary complexity of the work. Okay, Anna, would you like to say anything? Can I go ahead?
I was just saying that, like, if by any chance you would like to read some of the things that are harder, there's always like a lot of tools that you can use to do that. And this is something that we do in a book a month when we want to help students achieve when they want to read like the difficult stuff, for instance, right? Yeah. And you can always like read about the subject. You can also try to look for spark notes, for instance, which is something that helps a lot, right? So in this matter, I think it works as well. So you can go to the next slide, maybe. Yes. And also something that I myself used to do when I was learning English, but also now that I'm trying to get my German into advanced, I try and do that for German literature as well. But I think that when we are talking about English prose and young adult prose, this is something that we can have like a lot of good examples when we are talking about English literature. And I'm a big fan of young adult literature. For instance, Neil Gaiman, who is one of my favorites, and it's actually a book a month favorite. At least like once a year, we try to insert one of Neil Gaiman's book. And Stardust, for instance, was one of last year's favorites among our students in intermediate. This year, we read the graphic novel Death by Neil Gaiman as well, which was also a big hit. Also, we can talk about other examples as Madeleine L'Engle, A Wrinkle in Time, which is a young adult novel that has become a movie quite recently with Oprah. I don't know if you heard of this before, but it's quite interesting as well because it's a type of story that mixes astrophysics and family matters, which is very interesting as well. And one of like the absolute favorite of last year's intermediate was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So these are some examples of a type of fiction in English, which we guarantee that you're going to have both fun, you're going to find prose that is easy to access, and you're also going to learn a lot, right? Because these examples that we showed you today, these are not examples of writers who only write things that they aim at young adults, and that they don't insert any kind of interesting material in terms of life lessons or maybe literary references. It's quite the opposite. You learn a lot from this kind of books, right? So you have a lot to gain. And if you're trying to master a language, I think going for young adult fiction, it's a great option to do.
Yeah, young adult fiction, they are usually simpler on the vocabulary side, right? And you don't get so much complex grammar. So that's how we develop the reading habits with students in Brazil, for example. So the same thing applies when you're reading in a foreign language. So that's why we use it a lot in a book a month. And another way to start getting used with the idea of practicing a language through literature is using amusing and mysterious stories. So I've read a few Sherlock Holmes stories in German, for example, because you want to know what happens. It's not so complicated from the point of view of vocabulary and structure and vocabulary. So, and grammar. So it's not so complicated. It's a little bit more complicated than young adults, but still it's easier to cope with, and you want to know what will happen next. It's not very long either, so it's filled with cliffhangers, you know. So look, those dramatic moments. One chapter ends writing the in suspense. You want to know what will happen next. So you know, it's a page turner, as they say in English. So it's useful to use works like these to keep yourself motivated, right? So that's why we already read a few months ago the study Scarlet by Conan Doyle, or the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells, and that's also why we'll be reading next Agatha Christie's The Five Little Pigs, or The Hunting of Hill House, for example. So like ghost stories, this detective novels, these genres which are tied with a constant feedback on motivation. So they are a good place to start. Okay. Another thing you should take in mind is look for something you care about. Okay. The problem with learning language per se is that it should not be an end on itself. While you're learning, it's important for you to conjugate verbs, and it's important for you to, you know, do the job. You have to sit down and actually study, right? But then at some point, when you want to just keep your practice, when you want to keep your progress going on, not to get rusty, not to lose your progress, then you should look for something that you care about. You should use language as a means, as a tool, not as an end in itself. So if you're interested in, I don't know, in gardening, in sports, in the history of painting, in whatever, okay, in travel guides, whatever, just go for the things you're interested in. So if you want to learn about cats, great. So find a book about cats in English and read it. I've done this a few years ago. Actually, I wanted to practice my French, and I think the third season of Game of Thrones had come out. I wanted to start watching Game of Thrones because all my friends were watching it, but I did not want to we just waste so many hours of our lives watching series, right? So I downloaded Le Jeu des Trônes in reality. So I downloaded the Game of Thrones in French, and so I was watching it in French with French subtitles. And it was great because I really wanted to know what people were saying. I really wanted to know what they meant, what was happening. And so I was watching it with a lot of attention. I remember one peculiar scene which I had to watch like 15 times until I finally understood what they were saying. And when that happens, you'll never forget because you are emotionally attached. You finally understood on your own what was going on, and you learned in context, right? So it's very useful to go it this way. Yes, Anna.
Yes, I was going to give an example that I remembered now. YouTube is something that you can use for free, and there's loads of material waiting for you. So one thing that I used to do, because I do have like a lot of waves of the things that I like to watch on YouTube, but the thing that I was doing a few years ago, I was trying to watch videos about painting restoration. And this painting's restoration would be introduced by a guy who spoke German, right? So I would be watching about something that I'm very interested in. And this is something that I always tell Áureo, that when I retire, when I no longer teach, I'm going to do a course in painting restoration. And I'm going to be very fancy, like restoring paintings for museums one day in my life. And this is something that I used to do on my free time and learn a lot, like, because this is not the type of vocabulary that you can learn in your everyday basis. But then by the end of it, you master vocabulary about art just because you're watching something on your free time on YouTube. So it's a win-win situation, right, when you do this kind of techniques.
Precisely, yeah. Then another thing that happens is that we have to keep in mind that practice makes perfect, right? So that's the version, the English version of our proverb, right? So practice makes perfect. We have to be consistent. So there's no point in reading 50 pages in French and expecting to be fluent the next day. I'm sorry, guys, but the coaches lie. There's no way you're going to learn Mandarin in 3 weeks. No, it doesn't happen this way. I'm sorry. I wish it happened that way. I wish there was a magic pill I could swallow and I would be speaking German fluently. It does not happen, unfortunately. So we have to be consistent. We have to use progressions in a smart way. So just as I mentioned, it would be smart to go from texts which use everyday language, and then you progress into texts which are older and therefore a little bit more difficult, or texts of the same author, because authors tend to use the same vocabulary. So you start to getting used with it. So you read one novel by Jane Austen, it's a bit difficult. You read a second one, it's still difficult, but not so much. You read a third one, and it gets easier as you go, right? So you can organize it by period, historical period, by national literatures, by authors. There are many ways to organize it, but you should not expect immediate transformation. There will be progress, you get results, but they are also difficult to measure, okay? It's not like going on a diet. You can weigh yourself and then you can measure, oh, I've lost 3 kilos. It's difficult to measure what's your progress after you read a few novels. You understand that, yes, I feel more confident, I feel I understand more, but it's difficult to say what exactly got better, you know? And that's okay. That's the progress is fuzzy, it's difficult to pinpoint, and we should be aware of it. Okay. One extremely important things, one of the most perhaps important thing is cheat. Okay, so cheat. There are so many sources to help us out there. Okay, especially if you want to learn English. If you want to learn Bulgarian, I think you you are in a bad situation. I don't think you're gonna find so much material out there. But in English, man, everything we do, it's surrounded by English the entire time. And one of the things that really helps when we want to practice through literature is to use annotated editions. So this is one of the editions that we often suggest to our students in the book a month. Webster's Thesaurus. There are many others, okay, but this is a type of annotated edition. This is an annotated edition of The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, a classic of literature in English. We'll be studying this text in the next month in the intermediate course, and in this edition you can see here, it's small but still you can see it. Some words are marked, okay, and then at the bottom of the page you can see these words, they have synonyms and antonyms. So it's everything is English to English. This, you're reading the original text, but rather than going to the dictionary, you have all the vocabulary already explained in here for you. So this kind of editions, they're created for native speakers, actually, because the kids in high school, they have to read these works of literature, and it's difficult for them, just as it is difficult for us when we have to read Machado de Assis. It's not your everyday Portuguese, right? So sometimes you can find editions by great Brazilian authors editions which also include this type of work, right? This type of annotation. And so one of the sentences in this page is, "My fortitude mounted afresh," right? And so a very high way of saying my courage grew once again, right? So you don't have to know that fortitude means courage. You don't have to know that mounted means grew and that afresh means once again. But once you have the annotation, if you have the patience to go through back and forward, you will have a flavor of the original. You'll be able to digest it and then get to the meaning, right? So you have a learning opportunity, and you have an opportunity to really engage with these pieces. And come on, this is a literary text produced in the 19th century. So of course, 140 years have passed. So it won't be your everyday, if your everyday reading, and that's okay. Yes, Anna.
I just wrote on our chats. I know probably all of you know this, but I just wanted to stress that a thesaurus is a dictionary of synonyms, right? So this is how we call a dictionary of synonyms in English, and it's something that can be useful for all kinds of purposes. But I think that in this case, with the example, for instance, of Henry James, usually authors and people in general, they have like a selective quantity of vocabulary, right? And probably this vocabulary is going to repeat along the same novel or the same short story or another kind of writing. So the more you read, the more you will incorporate this new vocabulary while you're reading, and then you're going to learn more and more, right? So after this kind of reading, you will for sure have learned and absorbed more vocabulary as part of your own repertoire just by reading this kind of editions.
Yeah, and perhaps these editions, they are not always available, right? So one possibility is to use bilingual texts. So I used to do this a lot with German. For example, I would read one paragraph by Dalai Lama. I would kind of understand it, and then I would look into the Portuguese part and to check out if I really understood. Sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, sometimes I understood only partially, right? So to use bilingual text is very useful, okay? Sometimes you can buy books which are already bilingual, but if you cannot find them, cool. So look for something that is easy to find in the internet. If you want to, I don't know, practice using Kafka, for example. Kafka is not so difficult in German. So I would get the Metamorphosis. I have it in German at home. I have it in Portuguese. So I keep like one book in each hand, and then I'm reading one and then looking in the other, right? So Yes, you look a little bit crazy, but who cares? You're practicing your language, right? It takes more time. It takes effort. You can get sleepy. It's true, but it's very useful as well. You can use the same thing. You can do a similar thing actually in Kindle, right? So Kindle, you can configure it to use the dictionary, which you can buy. There are many options, but then just by clicking on the word, you can see the meaning, and then you can put stars in the word, so you can create your own flashcards. Okay, so after you read a book or while you're reading it, you can have like full lists of words which you have wrote down, and so it's also an opportunity for you to engage actively with the text you're reading, right? So I use a lot Kindle. Okay, and another possibility still is to use Google Translate, because or anything that works like Google Translate, because sometimes the problem is not vocabulary itself. Sometimes you understand all the words, but you don't really understand what they mean together, right? So sometimes I would be doing this, reading, and then if you don't understand one expression, you can just type it in Google and then translate it, and to see if it helps. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. So this is the thing. If you want to read in a foreign language, you have to accept that you will not understand everything 100% of the time, and that's okay. That is even, I find it exciting, this whole thing about searching for the meaning. It gets, after it becomes a habit, it can get pretty pleasurable actually. Yes, Anna.
Yes, people, and besides like assessing the new kind of meaning that the text might offer, like through tools as Google Translate, you can also use this kind of tools in order to learn how to pronounce the words that you are learning. But like you read the word, but sometimes you have no clue on how to pronounce them. And then you can just put it on Google Translate, or maybe access a kind of a dictionary, like for example, lexico.com, that you can listen to the word being pronounced. So besides learning the meaning, you will also be incorporating phonetics on your repertoire as well. So these are all great tools, right?
Yeah. Okay, number 6. Read shorter texts if the motivation is an issue. Sometimes it can be difficult to go through an entire novel, right? Because it does take longer. So one possibility is to try reading something shorter, okay? Something more immediately rewarding. So there are many authors in world literature who actually only wrote short stories, or mostly worked with short stories. That's the case of Anton Chekhov, for example, here on the left, or Hemingway. He wrote many novels, but a lot of short stories as well. Alice Munro, who is Canadian, and I think she's still alive, and she won the Nobel a few years ago. Okay, and we used a few of her short stories in a book a month. I think last semester, or the one before the last. And
It was
also
this year, yeah, actually.
Was this year? Yeah, last semester.
This year. And Alice Munro, she's actually best friends with Margaret Atwood, so it's very nice to see her to read her short stories. I think Leila, we were you in short stories already when we read Alice Munro? Yes, right? Yes. So it was very nice, and she has very intimate family stories, so it's interesting to read these different styles, right? So when you read like short stories, you also have the opportunity to access different writing styles by different authors with very short time. So like you take 40 minutes of your day or 40 minutes of your week, and you can read like Ernest Hemingway and Nabokov and Alice Munro and Edgar Allan Poe like in 1 week, which is something that sometimes is harder for you to do when you are reading novels, right? So this is also the quality of short text as well.
Yeah, and that's particularly true about Edgar Allan Poe, for example, which we'll be reading this next semester in a book a month. And Poe's text is a little bit difficult, actually, but they are short. they are 10 pages long, sometimes 5 pages long, and they are very mysterious, very amusing at times, sometimes scary, but they keep you grounded, right? They grasp your attention, and so because they're short, you can do the extra effort and read this text, which is a little bit more challenging. So more challenging on the linguistic side, but much shorter. So, you know, in the end, you reach harmony. So just another strategy, another possibility. Then there's one thing that is useful for learning in general, not only for foreign languages. Work on what you need rather than what you feel like. Okay, sometimes we prefer to work on stuff in which we're good at, right? So it's a challenge. Quite often, the things we don't like are actually the things we're not good at. I challenge you to be very good at something and not liking to do it, right? If you're good, probably you like it. If you don't like it, probably you're not good at it, right? So that's, you know, everybody had this experience in high school. You had that math test. So you had to study mathematics. You hated it. And then somehow you started to understand it and you got better and better while you were studying for the exam. And then you realized that you liked the thing. It was kind of cool, but you thought you hated it, but actually you learned to like it, right? And the same thing applies to learning a foreign language. So we have to assess our own progress. We have to assess our own difficulties. And then we have to work on our weak spots, not necessarily on our strong spots. So, for example, if you have a difficulty with the vocabulary that is used, perhaps you can practice spacious repetition. There are many apps that help you with that. So we are not very good in memorizing lists of words. We think we are, but when we test that, human beings, usually they're very bad in learning out of context. But one thing that we can use to learn vocabulary is to practice spacious repetition. So which means you look at the words now, and then you try to remember what they mean, and then you try it again tomorrow, and perhaps another time in 5 days. You know, the type of education that a musician gets. So rather than studying for 6 hours piano, rather than studying piano for a full day and then not playing anything for 2 weeks, that's not the smart way to study, right? A piano player, he would study, or she would study 1 hour every day, rather than doing a lot of study and then in one single time and then not doing anything for days on end. The same thing applies to learning language, and spacious repetition is a good way to go. There are many apps in the cell phone that can help you with that. You can create your own flashcards in some instances. And this technique I've never used myself, but I know someone who did. And I know Ana has used it already, okay? Yeah. Which is copying it by hand. And the person who told me this, the guy was studying ancient Greek, and he was copying by hand the dialogues of Plato. which is totally insane. But anyway, the guy was copying it, everything by hand, just as a way to practice, and it worked for him. I've never tried this. I don't think I will. It's not very much my style, but it really worked for him. So
yeah. I think that that copying by hand is something that it can be quite efficient, really. Well, my example is not so glamorous as copying dialogues by Plato, but when I was a teenager and I really wanted to learn English and to be fluent in English, and I have always been very interested in heavy metal bands. And what I used to do when I was a teenager was like listening to the songs and looking at the lyrics by Metallica, Megadeth, Angra, a Brazilian band, but who sings in English. And I used to copy the lyrics because at the same time I was trying to understand what was happening. I was memorizing the vocabulary, and I was learning how to write, how to spell the words, which is also something that can be very tricky in English, for instance, right? When you have like differences between words that look very similar, but they have very different pronunciation. Like, for example, through, though, tough, throughout, thorough, right? Very similar, but they do have different spelling. So for me, it helped a lot. The same thing for creating flashcards. I don't do it usually with actual flashcards, but I use different kinds of apps to do that. And one of those is Kindle. I don't know if you know this, but you can make your own flashcards with Kindle. You can create virtual flashcards where you have like one front with the word and the other, the back of the flashcard with the meaning of the word. And it helps a lot when you want to memorize things. I have created a while ago a reel trying to teach people how to do that on Kindle. I can share it again today, so you can learn how to do it for yourselves as well. I think that for other e-readers, it works as well, right? But it's just a matter of looking for the tool in the device.
Nice. Another possibility, and something that I really advise you to try, is to read it once more. Okay. On a second reading, we absorb so much more. We already know what will happen. We already know the story. So it is worthy of the investment of your time. If you don't want to read it everything again, you can try dynamic reading, so like get the book and just like flip through the sentences, just like pass your eyes through the page, and in order to kind of refresh your memory. You can try to listen to the audiobook instead, so you don't have to reread the book. You read the book once and then you listen to the audiobook the second time. It's pretty great. If you never tried audiobooks, I love it. I use it a lot. Perhaps that's one possibility for you to give it a try on a second reading. Or you can watch the movie, or you can look for the graphic novel, because many literary classics, they have graphic novels. They are adapted as graphic novels. So anything that will help you revisit the text, that will allow you to absorb it better. Okay. This second reading is truly a great exercise in which you can raise your absorption rate so much higher. So it's really worthy considering. Okay. I've seen once, I've mentioned at the beginning of the class that my modern Greek is very bad. Okay. Barely enough for daily things. And once I've been to a restaurant in Greece, and they had TV with friends with subtitles in Greek. And I had just watched that exactly that episode. So I knew everything was happening. I had watched like 3 or 4 days before. So I knew exactly what was happening. I knew more or less what they were saying. And there was no sound. There were only the Greek subtitles. And because I knew I was watching for the second time the episode, I could understand much more than I anticipated. Actually, it was very low. It was, I don't know, like 30%, perhaps less. But I was surprised because I was understanding so much more than I expected to understand. And the thing was not that my Greek miraculously became better. The thing was that I was watching it for the second time, and so I could guess. I could make smart guesses on what the words meant and how they were used in the grammar. So if it works for Greek, definitely it works for English. I'm 100% sure we're using the same alphabet, just for a start, right? Another thing that really helps us do this, to revisit the text, is to discuss. So debating is, I would say, very important to practice foreign language through literature. And once you discuss your ideas with others, you realize that you realize new things that you didn't think about before, and then the information will settle down, and the learning really increases. It's magical in a certain sense, but when you discuss it, many of the challenges go away, and you get very motivated, and the understanding really improves. So that's my personal experience as a reader, but that's also my personal experience as a teacher, not only in a book a month, but in other scenarios as well. Number 10, listen to audiobooks. I don't know if you guys do it already. Not everybody likes it. Not everybody tried it, but audiobooks are great. Okay, they can bring the text alive because they use different tones, different accents. They change the voices, right? So sometimes you have someone of one voice is doing the narrator, and then you have different voices for all the characters. So that really helps to understand. In some occasions, it really makes the difference. Even the special effects, you know, like somebody opens the door and then you have like this small noise of the door opening, or the suspense music. That makes a difference. And it's not only that it helps you to be focused, it gives you a different access. Rather than through your eyes, you're accessing the text through your ears. So for example, when you're listening, it's much easier to understand irony, to understand sarcasm, right? Because when you are sarcastic, we use a different tone of voice, and when it's written down, it's not so obvious if it's sarcastic or not. But when you're listening, we almost always know, right? And they save you so much time. You can be doing the dishes and listening to a novel or to a short story. So it really saves a lot of time. Yes, Anna.
Yeah, I think also like audiobooks can be very helpful when we have stories that sometimes it's difficult to tell who is speaking. Like, what is is the character who is speaking at the time of that specific passage of the text. So what I have heard from students is usually that when they have a hard time like understanding who is who in the text, usually they go to the audiobook and ask the person who is reading tends to make different voices for different characters. You kind of are led to understand much more of what is happening and who is who in each of the sentences. Plus, you also have, like, if you're reading an audiobook and if you're reading with your eyes, like a paperback at the same time, you'll also be working with your pronunciation and learning how to pronounce different kinds of words, right? Which sometimes cannot be so obvious. Like mostly when you're talking about languages as English, French, and also even German.
Great. We'll finish in 15 minutes, perhaps, guys. Okay, then we can answer 2 questions and comments. 11. Enjoy the challenge. I think there is a lot of pleasure to be discovered in this type of it's a different behavior in front of a book. Okay, rather than reading it passively, to read in a foreign language requires us to take a more active stand. So it requires a little bit more effort, but we can find the pleasure and the excitement in putting up the effort, right? So sometimes you don't know what a word is, but you guess, and then you can go look for it, and then you realize that you were correct, for example. So there are these small victories, which is it's pretty great. If you're the kind of person that loves crosswords or Sudoku or I don't know, like puzzles, you know, if you look to your language practice and to literature in the same way, for sure you find a lot of space to grow, and you get better the more you do it, and it becomes more and more automatic. To the point that at some point you will be able to do it as you do it in Portuguese, right? So it's a matter of being consistent and progressing with the journey. And above all, we have to keep calm and read on, right? So I think persistence is key here. If we want immediate results, unfortunately, there's not so much in it for us. The advantage is on the long run. It's on the long term, and it really helps so much. Sometimes, for example, when I read in Italian, I wrote my master thesis in Italian, like 200 pages. So I'm very, very confident with Italian, and I do read Italian just as I read in Portuguese. I very rarely I have to stop and go to the dictionary. It almost never happens. And it took me so many years actually to reach this level. But it's on the other hand, it's so it was a very pleasurable experience to, you know, to polish your language. It becomes something very a personal project, which can be very, very nice. So it's not something that appears from one day to the other. Okay, so these are some of the tips we have to share with you. We have a few more, but not all of them can be presented in this way, like lecturing. Some of them we have to experience. Okay, and we do use a lot of them in the book a month. So we'll present to you how the project works. If you guys want to join, you're very welcome. But if you don't, you can get a glimpse of, you can get some ideas out of it and use for your own readings, for your own purpose. Okay, so in a book a month, we work with two different groups, two different types of courses. One of them is the course novels, and the other one is the short stories, right? The course novels is divided in two levels, so intermediate and advanced. Okay, and what we do is we read a book a month, right? So the idea is the name of the school, right? We read one novel every month. That's the idea. So that's why we meet twice a month. Every 2 weeks we meet for 2 hours and a half. So it's a long class, right? And we discuss. So we read half the book in 2 weeks, and then the other half on another 2 weeks. So in the end of the month, we read the entire. And next semester, to give you an idea how we organize it in a progression, just as we advise you guys to do it. This time in the intermediate level, we'll be discussing ghost stories. Okay, so like horror and this genre, and then we'll shift into sci-fi. So two different literary genres with differences in language, a little bit more Victorian English, the end of the 19th century in the beginning, and then we get more and more into slang, into colloquial, informal English in the end. So they are in order here. Read first The Turn of the Screw, a great classic by Henry James. Then we will read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which is awesome, which is really a great story. Not so scary as one would expect, but still, it can get you 1 hour or two out of your sleep. Then we go into H.P. Lovecraft with At the Mountains of Madness, very famous author from the 1930s. Great book about an expedition to Antarctica where they meet like an alien civilization. It's pretty nice. And then we move into sci-fi with Slaughterhouse Number 5 by Kurt Vonnegut, which is a classic from the 60s. Extremely funny, actually hilarious, a hilarious book. It's about a guy that is abducted by aliens and he fights in World War II. So it's very deep. It's very critical of the USA military campaign in Germany. It's very critical of the World War II in general, very critical of the Nazis, etc. But also very funny, very ironic. And then we end up with a popular bestseller and a popular culture icon, I would say, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is also very funny and very informal, right? So this is the type of idea that we have when we say about a progression of texts. One of the texts will help you with the other. The vocabulary will communicate from one to the other. There is a smooth transition, not only in language, but also in literary style, in literary genres. Yeah. Yes, Anna.
And also people like if because this is a subject that has come out in class before, like people were saying like, oh, I don't know if I'm very comfortable in reading ghost stories and scary stories of about UFOs or about ghosts and the paranormal and all. But I mean, like reading it, it's very different than watching movies that have this kind of character, right? Because when you're reading scary stories and ghost stories, usually you can administer your fear because you can administer your own imagination. So if you think that you wouldn't like it, then you can think of me. I hate scary movies, hate them. I can never watch them, but I love this kind of stories, mostly because I can administer my fear, so I can only enjoy like the controlled scare, and then I have a lot of fun with it. And I heard the same kind of experience from other students as well. And this seems to be a way to start like introducing like piece by piece scare and like fear in your own imagination, which is pretty good.
Yeah, and in many cases, like in The Turn of the Screw, for example, yes, it is a ghost story, but actually we don't really know because the narrator, she could be crazy as well. So we don't really know if it's someone who is like delusional, or if it's or if the supernatural things are really happening. So this is one of the great things about The Turn of the Screw. We can't really know. It's a little bit like Dom Casmurro, you know, like Capitu traiu or não traiu. It's a little bit the same. Like, is she crazy? Is she not? There are ghosts. There are not, right? So it's pretty cool in this sense. So there you go. We'll be talking about ghosts and sci-fi. So this is one way we organize it. The same thing applies to the advanced levels. In the novels course, we'll be talking about love in different forms, right? So marital love, but also friendship and sons and daughters. So the relationship between parents and their sons and daughters. So there is a thematic line, but also the same type of progression. So we'll start with Jane Austen, a great classic, Persuasion. Our personal favorite, and I know I can speak in Anna's name as well. I'm sorry, Pride and Prejudice, but her real book is Persuasion, in my opinion. Then we move into A Room with the View by E.M. Foster, another great author from England. Agatha Christie, Five Little Pigs, lots of mysteries and crimes to solve. Then we will read actually an Italian writer, Elena Ferrante. Okay, so she's alive. The Lost Daughter. So we'll be reading this in translation. This is one of the things that we also value a lot. One of the advantages of reading English is that allows you to read so many things which are not translated into Portuguese. I'm about to start a collection of Chinese short stories, an author which is called who is called Pu Songling, and it's not translated into Portuguese. It's not available in Portuguese. So if I could not read English, I would not be able to read it, right? So this is one of the great things about reading in a foreign language. It opens your possibilities so much. And so be reading The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante, and then we finish with The Hours by Michael Cunningham, who won the Pulitzer Prize, which is a great literary prize in English. And it's a famous movie as well. So it will be definitely very exciting. The other typology, of course, is the short stories. Okay, so it's pretty different. We have classes every week. The idea is you read shorter things, maximum 10 pages, so very, very short. You will read little but constantly, right? So up to half an hour of reading a week. And then you have classes every week. Classes are shorter, just an hour and a half, but then you have more constancy, shorter classes, but more frequent classes, okay? And then we will be reading in the short stories course. We try to offer a banquet of literary possibilities. So we read many, many different authors authors who are old classics, but also modern classics. We try to balance out men and women, people from different countries around the world. So we'll start this semester with Edgar Allan Poe. We usually read 2, sometimes 3 short stories by each author. So we start with Poe, an amazing writer. Then we move into Shirley Jackson, who is the author of The Hunting of Hill House. So we'll be reading her in 2 different courses. We'll then read a very funny short story by Oscar Wilde. Then we read Ursula Le Guin. I don't know if you guys know her, but she's very famous for fantasy and sci-fi. Very, very talented writer. Then Nabokov, who was Russian, but wrote most of his literary works in English, either wrote directly in English or he translated himself from Russian into English. We'll read Chinua Achebe, who is a Nigerian writer from the 70s, an outstanding writer. He wrote very, very important novels like Things Fall Apart, for example, one of the great post-colonial classics. Beautiful poetic novel, Things Fall Apart, amazing, highly recommended to you. And his native language is not English, it's Igbo, but he decided to write in English, to use a language that was not his own, and he did it on purpose with an English that is very simple, sometimes even committing grammatical mistakes on purpose. So it's very interesting to use. It's not difficult to read at all, right? So it's a good place to start. Chinua Achebe. We will read 2 of his short stories. We move into Flannery O'Connor, from a woman writer from the USA, extremely talented, amazing short stories. And then we end up with Mark Twain, who is super funny, and it's an author also from the US, writing literature in the 19th century, a little bit the early 20th century as well, right? Would you like to say anything, Anna?
I was just doing the chat as well as you were speaking. I was taking notes, not to forget anything. People, I think that one thing that is very important to remind you of is that in each of these models of courses, we do not only have like moments only to discuss, but also we do teach you about, like tools and some important concepts about literary theory, and also we have an introduction to the literary text before we start the discussion, right? We do have the classes separated in 2 parts. So we do have the intro, right? And then we do the discussion prompts as well. Yeah, so it helps you out discuss, but also we are teaching you something more about the literary works in order to make your understanding a little bit more, even more complex than it already was from your first reading.
Yeah, usually it varies. It depends on the text, but usually in the novels course, since the classes are 2.5 hours long, so in the first part of the class, me or Anna will be talking about the author, the historical context, the literary techniques, and etc. And then on the second part of the class, we would have more discussion and conversation. It varies. Sometimes we talk before and then we lecture afterwards, or sometimes we do both at the same time. But it is great to know a little bit about language styles, literary motives, symbols. It really increases our awareness and our understanding of the text. Even if you're not our students, one thing that you might wish to imitate, or our advice is to try to stick with a certain reading, a certain weekly reading. So that's what we try to do in our courses. For those who join the short story courses, they read up to 10 pages a week. So that's just like half an hour you can read it while you're in the bus or in the traffic jam, even if you're listening to audiobooks. In the intermediate course, our idea is that you will read like 30 pages a week max. Okay, so that would be an hour and a half, 2 hours, perhaps less than 2 hours, probably. And if you wish to take the novels advanced course, then it's about 50 pages a week. So that would be 3 hours perhaps of reading, 4 hours, depending on how slow or how fast you can take it, right? And you can do this on your own. When I was studying German and reading more German, I would try to set like a timer for myself, like, okay, this week I've read only 30 minutes of German, so I'll try to get to 3 hours, you know. So then I would have this timer in my phone, and every time I started reading, I would have the timer. And so just a way to check, to make sure that I would be dedicating at least this amount of time. So in a sense, I was working as my own personal trainer. You know, sometimes when people go to the gym, they hire the personal trainer, not because they really need the exercise, but because they need someone to be on their back, someone to be watching, saying like, go, you have to do it, you know. So the presence of a personal trainer is important. And sometimes we can do something that is similar to ourselves. We do not use grades. We prefer to use a horizontal didactics, so horizontal pedagogy of self-assessment. I think it's very important when we're learning languages and we're reading literature. We do it because we like, we do it for pleasure, we do it, yes, to practice, to improve, but it's not something that we would do it with a very, very specific end in mind, right? So self-assessment, self-awareness of your own progress is extremely important, not only for learning language, for life, right? But we try to practice this in this scenario. Okay. Finally, last 2 minutes. Don't panic when you have to decide what to read. Plan in advance. So if you know that you're going on vacations for 5 days, okay, so plan your reading. When you will read. You will read before you go on vacations. You will read when you come back, but you have to plan it, okay? Rather than panicking afterwards. Set some time aside. You could stack habits. So let's say you have to take the bus every day to work. Perhaps you can do that in the bus, and then you do it consistently. Every day you get in the bus, your book is out and you're reading, right? It could work that way. Or you're getting your breakfast and reading, I don't know, or listening to the book. But you could stack habits, okay? So pile up several habits to make sure that you have time to read. I advise you guys to establish your goals and try to check your progress. I try to do myself. I try to do the same myself with German. Don't stop to check every word, okay? Sometimes when people are reading, some people are very picky. They want to understand 100% every single word. Okay, that's a way to go. That's a way to go. I'm this kind of person. It is great. You learn so much, but it takes so much effort, so much time, and you get frustrated on sometimes. So I would advise you, in general terms, do not do it. Try to understand it. Try to guess the meaning. Go to the dictionary only when you really need to. But if you're the type of person that wants to understand every single word and you can keep yourself motivated, then that's great. If it works for you, that's awesome. So then do it. So, that's what when I'm talking about self-assessment, that's exactly what I mean. If it works for you, do it. If it doesn't, don't do it. Okay. You don't have to beat yourself to do something that it's against your own nature. Try to use audiobooks. There's so much gold in there. And usually we advise our students to come to class even if they haven't finished, because sometimes our difficulties, as I said in the beginning of the class, it's not the language. Sometimes it's the literary style, it's the literary genre, it perhaps is the narrator's point of view. So sometimes there are other things that contribute to our non-understanding, and learning a little bit more about literature itself really helps when we're doing that. Okay, just in case you're wondering, some practical information. These are the time of the classes. Okay, so on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday. Remember that the novels course, they only take place once in every 2 weeks. Okay, so 1 week you have class, the other one you don't. Okay, yes, Anna.
Now, just concerning the previous slide, one thing that I was going to mention to you as well is the other one. Yes, this one. Is that joining book clubs, it's a good thing when you're trying to keep up a reading habit, mostly because the book club itself is already a goal for you to achieve, right? Because, for instance, when we have to meet up to discuss a part of a book, usually we have to plan which kind of chapters and until which page are we going to discuss. So this is already a goal for you to plan ahead in order for you to try to manage your own routine and try to establish when are you going to read along your days and along your week, right? So this is very helpful as well to help you by the end of the year, you're going to be counting the number of things that you have read throughout of the whole months and weeks that we have been together discussing books, right? So it's a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah, in the novels course, when we actually read a book a month, at the end of the year, it's probably about 10 books, right? Or 11. We don't read, like we have occasions, right? So, but usually it's 10 or 11 books. It depends on how many months we had of class, right? So it is a good way to read consistently. Okay, I've showed you guys the timetable. These are the prices, and we monthly the payment is 140 reais, or for people that pay the entire semester in once, so which means 5 months in just one single payment, then there's a 15% discount. If people do more than one course, they have another 10% off or even 15% off. So it depends. So these are the prices, and all the information regarding time, regarding the price, or regarding the reading lists and the authors, you can find all of them in our Instagram as well, and you can always chit chat with us. Our WhatsApp is over there as well, so we're always glad to talk about it. These are the first books we'll be discussing. So starting in 10 days from now, next Thursday, we start with the novels intermediate course, discussing the first chapters of The Turn of the Screw. If you guys are interested, on the 13th, which means 2 Saturdays from now, or on the 18th, we will start discussing persuasion in the novels advanced course, and in the short stories on the 16th of August. So in 2 weeks, a little bit more than 2 weeks time, we will start discussing Poe in the short stories course. Okay, so this is our agenda. At the bottom line, we promise 2 things: a lot of learning and a lot of fun. And if you're our student or you're not, it doesn't matter. I think you can find both things on your when you use literature as a way to practice and to learn and to acquire your foreign language. Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed the tips, and thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, just let us know.
Any questions, people? If you don't have a mic, you can write it on chat and I'll read it out. And but don't, if you want to ask yourself, just start speaking or you raise your hand and we can all chat about it. Oh, that's great to hear it, Yasmin. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin.
No questions? Thank you, Paula. All right. Thank you, Anderson. Thank you, Eloisa. Thank you, Paula.
That's great.
Yeah.
I'm happy you guys liked it, because some of these are, it took so many years for us to gather all of these, and a lot of personal experience as well. There are other things we use. I think one of the things that I haven't mentioned in the class, but it's something I love to do, is to combine reading and listening all at the same time. So this is something that I always advise our students to do. I didn't put on the slides, my bad. But this is something that is really great. So, for example, you're reading Sherlock Holmes, and then it's very easy to find audiobooks, especially when Sherlock Holmes, there are so many available in YouTube or whatever. So I would be reading and listening at the same time. It can be English, but you can also twist it a little bit and make your life harder. So one thing, for example, that I did use in German was reading in German and listening in Portuguese. Okay, I would do this with Sherlock Holmes, for example, or the opposite: read it in Portuguese and listen it in German. So it was a mess. Like your brain, you know, your nose starts bleeding. You really, but it's great. It's very difficult. It's very confusing in the beginning, but it really helps you so much. So you can even start to combine those things, right? Bilingual editions, audiobooks. You can find your own methods within, and they really, in the end of the day, they really make a huge difference.
Yeah, and also people, I don't know if you do that, but I think that you might often do that as well. I do have audio memory. Like I memorize things more if I listen to it, right? Rather than just like seeing things. So like for me, audiobooks are a great choice, mostly because I memorize things more when I'm listening, right? But if for you it's different, like if you need to practice by writing or maybe by reading, so then you should focus on these kind of tools much more, because this is like playing with what you do best, right? Like with learning how to find your own methodology is really good to help you absorb more from what you're learning. Yes, Rogério, please.
Hello, everybody. I already signed up in the short stories course, okay? And I want to know how and when you provide the test, what's the better way to find the books. That's my question.
Going to love it, Rogério. It's great. It was one of my pleasures this semester. You get in touch with new people and new authors, and it's because of my constraint of time. I choose short stories, but it's great. And Anna, it's a great teacher. You're going to love her.
Thank you, Leila. Yes, usually we provide a folder with all the short stories previous, like in the beginning of the semester, you already have access to all the short stories, and all the short stories are organized in our folder with dates, name of the authors, and also the titles, right, to make it easier for you to follow up. Yes, and then you can always have access to that throughout the whole semester. So you don't need to purchase anything for short stories, right? It's all there for you.
Yeah, so usually the short stories we provide, and then the novels we usually don't, unless it's publicly available, right? So because, you know, I love my bed, I don't want to spend time in jail because of piracy. but students do share among themselves, so, and it's not a problem. We cannot do it because we're a company, but students often share between themselves. We do suggest specific editions, right? So and usually they're very affordable, so like for 50 reais or 60 reais you can buy them on, if you prefer like the paper editions, we usually suggest that, or the Kindle edition. So yeah, but in novels you have to find the books generally, but in the short stories we are allowed to provide to you because they're just a little percentage of the total work, right?
Thank you.
So Andressa was asking if there's another kind of way to pay, if it's just like bank transfer. But also, like, we can issue a payment slip, like a boleto, right? And also like Pix. Like, this is what we can do for this semester, but we are planning for the next year to start accepting credit card. Yeah, it's it's a family business, people. So it's difficult to get too modern, but we're trying. Any more questions that you would like to ask? No? Okay, so if not, we can wrap up. Let me just check on YouTube if there's any question. No question. So people, we would like to wrap this up and thank you all for being here. It was a great pleasure to meet you all. And for the ones I already met, thank you for joining us again in this class. And we hope to find you again in other open classes that we offer in the future, and also as our students. Thank you very much, and it was lovely meeting you. And have a great week.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a good week.
Bye-bye. See you all. Thank you.
Cheers.